So let's see if I can comprehensively pull together all of my thoughts on that finale. And all of these emotions are still flowing freely, to the point where I can't think completely straight. It's still hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that the Bad Batch is over as a series. Wednesdays won't feel the same anymore. With Tales of the Empire coming out this Saturday and life being a bit hectic lately, I don't know when I'll get to it, but I still do have a few final Bad Batch videos lined up, reflecting on that season, the series as a whole, where things could go from here, all that kind of stuff. Because I absolutely need an outlet to talk through my emotions from all of this. This review is going to be a lengthy one, so I think it's best if I get right into it. Noticing the longer runtime going into the episode immediately eased some of my concerns, because I would have been very worried if I saw that the finale was only 20 minutes like the average episode, but thankfully, we got a little more time here to wrap things up, and I think it did it all perfectly. Obviously I'll talk more about it near the end of the review, but I thought everything got touched on for the most part, and it never felt rushed or drawn out too long. Because of the time I watched the episode at, which was roughly 3 in the morning, there were occasional times when I tried to see how much time was left, but based solely on that episode, it never bored me or made me impatient to move on. The different intro coming into the episode immediately gives very ominous vibes, and we pick right back up with the Empire still looking for the Bad Batch in the jungle. Crosshair makes a nice joke towards Wrecker about fighting with the creature, and that was something I really appreciated about this episode. It was a very stressful and ominous episode, as it should have been with everything going on, but it also made sure to include moments like this that eased the mood a bit. It most often came in the form of dialogue as a joke, but it was enough to cause a laugh or at least relax me a bit despite the constant barrage of anxiety and stress over the story, worrying about who was going to die, stuff like that. It wasn't overly used where it took over the story, but it was occasional enough where it created some hills and valleys in the tone that made everything hit even harder. Between it being nighttime now and Tantus on red alert, everything made this feel more like the end. This is what it's all been building to, and there were brief moments throughout the episode where I was reminded that this is it. This was the end of the season, the series, the characters. I really found myself appreciating this final episode more thoughtfully, knowing that it was the end. Hemlock goes to visit Rampart in his little holding cell, and even though Rampart didn't get much to do in the finale, as he was locked away for most of it, I really found it interesting here seeing two Imperials go at each other. They're both similar in many ways, with their hubris and overconfidence, so they were able to trade verbal blows the exact same way and both could stand up to each other. We pick back up with Carr helping Echo as he goes through the database, and Carr admits that she was wrong about Tantus and she wants to do the right thing now. I had a slight issue with the focus here, as I would have really liked to see Carr in focus rather than Echo when she was the one talking, just because that's where my eyes were drawn to the scene rather than Echo's facial expressions while he's working, but that's something small that may not be a problem on a rewatch. Omega starts telling the other children about her plan for escape, and although they don't know what they're getting into, the promise of going home was enough to convince them to at least give it a shot. Omega's able to reprogram the medical droid and use it to drug Skeldar and knock her out, which gives them the time and freedom to work. And I was sort of surprised by how fast everything started to go down, but it made sense since this was the finale. And then not long after, we pick back up with Carr and Echo making their way through security measures towards the vault, and I found it interesting how nobody questioned a TK trooper going besides Carr into the vault. I don't recall if we've seen that kind of soldier in there before or if it's only been commandos, but it stood out to me because I actually have a video coming out soon talking about the Empire's inability to question things, and how it led to their downfall. While they walk through, Carr explains the children's importance to Echo about as broadly as she could have, where it's just enough to answer his questions. It's not meant to give us any new insights into the project, only to tide Echo over so he has an idea of what he's dealing with. However, once they arrive in the vault, Omega and the other kids are nowhere to be found. I was surprised that Hemlock put the blame on Skeldar and her incompetence for allowing them to escape, rather than Carr as the chief scientist, but he also does tie her fate to Omega's, so it becomes more of her responsibility to get them back. I also really enjoyed the Big Brother vibes when they learned that the Zillo Beast was set free. He pretty much instantly knows that it was Omega's doing, as it's what he would have done as well. Seeing the Zillo Beast set free by Omega naturally reminded me a lot of the Clone Wars episode now that it's fully sized, but it also seemed much darker here, at least right off the bat, as we see the creature devour a stormtrooper. I don't think we were at that level of violence in the Clone Wars when that episode premiered. The Zillo Beast is able to climb out fairly easily, the containment protocols are entirely useless, and the Empire can't do anything to stop it, which is obvious from the onset. We then shift back to the Bad Batch, and even though it looked bad last episode, I didn't think Wrecker had been hurt that bad by the creature. He's shown to be seriously hurt in this episode, and the creators absolutely succeeded in making me constantly concerned over his well-being and whether he would make it through the episode. Crosshair's hand also causes him obvious distress, and everyone seems to be falling apart physically right now, which, in a final episode where many have theorized that somebody wouldn't make it out alive, was shooting my anxiety through the roof while watching. Crosshair comes up with a plan for Hunter and Wrecker to contact Rex, while he infiltrates Tantus alone, and this conversation was the first of many times where the emotions started to hit. We just saw his hand shaking, and now he wants to storm an Imperial base as a one-man show. Doesn't sound like the best of ideas. He knows he probably wouldn't make it out alive, but after everything he's done, it's what he feels he deserves, to go through with Plan 99 and make sure the other two are there to raise Omega. And his line of Clone Force 99 died with tech really had me taken aback emotionally. Even though he wasn't there, that line really hit hard for me, because he's doing anything he can to justify going in alone at this point. He wants to pay for his actions by himself, and his brothers won't let him go alone. The Zillo Beast escapes out of the base, and I was surprised how that kind of just got forgotten in everything for the episode. Hemlock sends more reinforcements towards stopping the Zillo than to stop the Batch from entering the base, but after that, we never really hear about the creature again, so I think it's safe to say that it's just roaming around Wayland at this point. And we never really got an explanation for why it was being kept on Mount Tansa specifically either. Hemlock choosing to send out reinforcements for the Zillo did make me question what plan he had in mind. How maybe we'd either get to see the Dark Troopers I've theorized about, or maybe the Zillo was just more important than we realized, but these questions were answered shortly afterwards. Hemlock goes to a special clone chamber, and I got very anxious here that it was going to be some clone we know like Tech or Cody, especially after I just posted a video about Tech not coming back anymore. We get to see all of the special CX troopers come out like Hemlock is raising an army of the dead, and they all look to be a little unique in their appearance, almost like they were made to be the antithesis of the Bad Batch. Many compare to CX2 to Crosshair when the two of them previously fought. One is larger and stronger than the others like Wrecker, one is quick and has two knives like Hunter, and then the other one has a spear, which I didn't really think compared to either Echo or Tech. But they were undoubtedly the designs that had been occasionally shown on Hemlock's datapad earlier in the season. Crosshair tries to cover the others as they escape, but they all get beat pretty quickly and pretty badly. Hunter gets hit by some debris, and then what the heck, Crosshair gets his hand chopped off. This was shocking to see, but part of me honestly couldn't take this moment seriously because I was thinking, at least that problem is over. We never got a straight up explanation for Crosshair's hand tremors and what was causing them, but here we just slice that bad boy off and move on. With how the episode was going at this point, I was not expecting for the Batch to get beaten so badly and captured by the Empire. I thought they would have been able to get away and prepare for another confrontation down the line, but I think this worked to keep the same desperate tone in the episode. I also liked how the special CX clones have more unique weapons, like the spear, blades, and whatever else is in there. It's not solely them running around with blasters, but they get to show off their enhanced capabilities through the weaponry. And then Echo and Carr have to watch as the squad gets rolled by on carts, and I don't know what it was exactly about the scene, but I was getting major Empire Strikes Back vibes. Whether it was from the music, tone, or whatever, I don't know. I was also very impressed that Echo kept his eyes on the children rather than wanting to go save his brothers first. This was also where I started to question what was going on with the other clones on Tantus. It had barely been mentioned as of yet and didn't even feel like it was part of their objective anymore. Carr and Echo are soon thereafter able to find Omega and the children, and there was a moment with them a little earlier that I skipped over but still wanted to mention. When they have to climb up the insanely tall ladder to get out of Tantus, Omega has to help Jax overcome his fear of heights, and although it was a little on the nose, I liked how we got a bit of a lesson in this final episode. There have been a lot of things to learn throughout the series, but for some reason it didn't feel like Season 3 had as many of these moments. Omega basically tells him that he's allowed to be afraid in life. Even the best soldiers are afraid of things. But what matters is your ability to push through and do it anyways. It was a nice, more personable moment with the kids where they weren't running for their lives. Echo and Carr are able to find the kids, and I loved the surprised look on Omega's face when she sees Echo again. Something that did bother me a bit was how one note Carr continues to come off. There's no emotion in her voice, so despite all of her actions, I don't care all that much about her. They all make their way to the shuttle, and Carr takes the children away to Pabu while Echo and Omega go back for the other clones. Even though it was more of a see you later than a goodbye, it was still a bit of an emotional scene for me, and it gave me hope that maybe things will all work out by the end of the episode, and everyone will make it home safe. But then we head back to the problem. As Omega and Echo left again, I couldn't help but wonder what Palpatine's reaction to all of this was going to be, and I assumed we would get to see him arrive at the end of the episode, but sadly we never saw him in this episode at all. I also began to question what the other bases in the background of Wayland are used for. I had noticed them before, but with it being nighttime they're a little more obvious, and there's a Zillo beast out there that could potentially cause them a lot of destruction. We know that Tantus focuses on cloning, but it would be neat to see in the future what the other locations are for, if they are for something different. We then return to Hemlock putting the Batch through mental reconditioning, including an altered method to try with Crosshair again, and if there wasn't enough reasons to hate Hemlock, what he's doing to them here is just another one on the list. He's trying to make them into loyal Imperial soldiers, and it's an interesting what-if scenario to think about had he been successful. But at the end of the day, they're just too strong cognitively to be controlled like that. Echo and Omega make their way to the detention level, collecting blasters as they go along, and they are able to free all of the clones plus Nala Se and Rampart without too much of a firefight. After the children escaping and now this, things really felt like they were taking a turn for the better in this episode, which both made me hopeful for how the end could turn out, and very concerned that something sinister was on the way. The clones all rally to help Echo and Crosshair free the Batch, And meanwhile, Nalase can't let her research remain in the Empire's hands. I really liked how she still had a part to play in the episode and wasn't cast off with the clones taking over the story now. She makes her way to the research facility with a thermal detonator, and I was so confused why Rampart was doing what he was doing here, sneaking around and following her. I just didn't get what his purpose was here anymore, and if he didn't want to fight besides the clones as a changed man, then I honestly just wanted to see him leave them all behind and stay out of it all. But instead he makes things difficult, and threatens Nalase as he tries to learn more about Project Necromancer. I thought that bringing back his character meant that he could possibly have more character development and a potential redemption arc, but he stayed the exact same, cowardly Imperial ever since he was freed from prison, which looking back on it now, made him very irritating to watch. We don't know how much he learns here, but he plans on using it as a bargaining chip with the Empire, which probably would have backfired on him anyways, but instead he gets blown up by Nalase with the detonator, getting absolutely what he deserved. After not caring about cloning at all, and being the one to bring down Kamino, it felt so fitting for him to be killed by a Kaminoan in a cloning research facility after he tried to access the cloning data to bargain with the Empire that it cast him out. Hemlock was a very hateable villain in the series, but Rampart was right up there with him sometimes. Jumping back to the clones, I started to become very concerned for Echo's safety. There were sporadic moments like this throughout the episode where I would fixate on one detail and see a way how the character was going to get killed off. Here, it was seeing Echo run around in Stormtrooper armor. I could easily see him being mistaken for an Imperial in the crossfire, and that being how he meets his end, so I was concerned for him throughout all of this action, especially when Hemlock releases the gas and visibility goes down. They all end up attacking the reconditioning facility from the bottom, while Omega tries to free her brothers from inside, but of course it doesn't go as planned. They stand no chance against the special soldiers, and Omega is discovered before she can finish freeing Wrecker. However, he's eventually able to come back to reality and free himself and the others, and we get a good old-fashioned brawl as the Bad Batch takes on the even badder Batch, I guess. They were definitely able to take out the Imperial soldiers easier than I was expecting, which I didn't mind because it moved the story on to the more impactful part, which was Hemlock taking Omega away to get on a ship as Hunter and Crosshair go after her. It was fascinating to see Hemlock in such a different light here, because by now, all he has is Omega. Everything else is gone, and he's more afraid than we've seen him ever before, because I think part of him knows that there's no way for him to win in this scenario, no matter what happens. There's a bit of a standoff between Hunter and Crosshair, and then Hemlock holding Omega captive, and I was constantly afraid that someone was going to die here. We were at that part of the episode where it would have made sense for the emotions to hit hard right now at the climax before everything starts to conclude. And with Wrecker extremely hurt, and Crosshair and Hunter going after Omega, it didn't look too good. It felt impossible for everyone to get a happy ending. But in the end, it all works out. Crosshair and Hunter are able to take out the ship and Scorch, and even with shooting from his left hand, Crosshair is able to trust himself enough to shoot at Omega's binders in a very quick sequence that left her free and Hemlock collapsing over the edge. They're all reunited once again, and it was like I was finally able to take a long, deep breath and relax. And some part of it felt fitting that Hunter and Crosshair were the two there to save Omega at the end, after everything we've seen from both of them. They depart from Tantus pretty quickly after that, right before Governor Tarkin and the Empire arrive. All that research is gone, and in a classic Tarkin move, he moves all the funding towards Project Stardust, aka the Death Star. This setback explains why Palpatine was so far behind on his cloning experiments when he died in Return of the Jedi, and why it continued to be a problem in The Mandalorian. So it'll be interesting to see more of it in The Mandalorian and Grogu after getting all of this other background knowledge. Pabu becomes a little clone paradise as they all temporarily move in while searching for what to do with their lives. Car goes with Echo to Pantora to help Chuchi's case, something that feels like it'll be continued somewhere else eventually. It was kinda disappointing to see Echo leave again just like that, but I guess he's a busy guy. He's not looking to settle down peacefully like the rest of them are. This ending on Pabu really felt like the end of all their stories, wrapping it up nicely with a bow. They get to live their lives now, whatever that means to them, and they don't have to worry about the Empire hunting them. I had figured we might see some sort of final scene to conclude it all, but I was not expecting such a major time jump. Omega is older now, probably in her teenage years from the looks of it, and the way she and Hunter go back and forth. As jarring as it was to see them so much older, the parent-child bond between them meant that they were able to really settle down on Pabu for a long time, which was nice to see. Omega's going off to fight for the rebellion, and after an emotional goodbye, she boards her new ship and takes off. Tech's goggles are now on the ship, and while it was initially just a nice touch, I saw a Twitter comment that said he'll always be looking over her, and that had me getting emotional, man. There's a part of me that wishes we never had this final scene, because I think it was wrapped up so nicely before that where it didn't end on a cliffhanger and I could just assume that every character got their happy ending. But Omega going off to fight with the rebellion and continue helping people makes so much sense for her character, especially after the way we saw her lead the other children to safety on Tantus. It makes me a little concerned about her safety down the line now that she's fighting in another war, but it also opens up the possibility to see more of her again in future stories. I don't know if it'll be an animation, but I think her appearing in the background of a book or comic or something, sort of like how Hera and Chopper have in some scenes since we learned of them. That's something I could see for Omega. And then the final credits rolled, and it finally hit me that this was it. I can't believe that it's the end of the series. I was very surprised with how positive the series ended on. Thankful, but surprised. None of the good guys died except for Nalase, and the only thing that was lost was Crosshair's hand. And yet it still never felt out of the question for something horrific to happen. It was such a blast getting to watch the series every week, and like I mentioned before, I still have a few videos I'd like to make wrapping up my coverage of The Bad Batch, and then we move on to Tales of the Empire and the Acolyte. What did you think of this episode of The Bad Batch? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to like the video, and subscribe as I finish up my coverage of The Bad Batch and move on to new shows. And remember to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Thank you all for watching, and remember, the Force will be with you. Always.